So I've been told that you all can hear us. That's great. So we are not starting with any audio or technical glitch today. That's a first. And talking about first, this is our first podcast of our hopefully long series where we are thinking about connecting with all sorts of change makers around the globe who are working in the realm of urban design, planning, anything to do with bringing about positive change in our cities. Uh, and the idea is that we need to build a cohort of a lot of people who are working towards bringing a positive impact, and see if we can exchange ideas. A lot of time, like Kishore says, magic happens when we mix a lot of things together. And the idea is that if we can learn from a lot of experiences, challenges from different people, we might be able to take informed calls and decisions. So this series, hopefully, we're hoping that this would kickstart a conversation between urbanists and change makers to bring about positive change around the globe. And today, to kickstart this series, we have Kishore Varanasi with us. I'm going to ask Mahesh to introduce Kishore to this podcast series.
Good morning, everybody. So we have here today Kishore Varanasi. He's an award-winning urban designer, strategist, architect, and above all, like a mentor to all of us over here. All three of us, Sarfraz, myself, Mahesh, and Mansi, all three of us, when we started StudioPOD, Kishore has been right throughout that entire journey, looking at us, encouraging us, working with us, collaborating with us on several things as well. He actually has a very interesting journey. He comes from a very humble background in one of the villages in Andhra Pradesh. He grew up there, and then he went ahead, did his architecture from JNTU, Hyderabad. And from there, he actually worked with architect B.V. Doshi for a few years. And then post that, went for his master's in architecture from Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and did his second master's in urbanism at MIT, at Cambridge. And then from there on, he has been working at CBT Architects, leading a lot of their urban design projects, virtually setting up the whole urban design practice at CBT from almost scratch, and has now built a really good team of urban designers who work on amazing projects throughout the globe. He works a lot on innovation districts all over US, in Middle East, a lot of climate resiliency projects, and kind of a good host of master planning, urban design projects, both with public and private sector. One of the amazing things that we have always seen Kishore do is like he's a great collaborator and can get a lot of cool ideas from everybody and assemble it as a package of how urban design master plans come together. So we are very, very fortunate today to have Kishore here with us. And welcome, Kishore. Welcome to our little podcast, the first of its kind that we have started. And it's really good to hear from you how we actually do the next half hour, starting with the same journey that I asked in the beginning. How is this journey from India to the US, now leading an urban design practice there, has really helped you as an urban designer, and your perspective on it?
Great. Thanks, Mahesh, Sarfraz, and Mansi. First of all, it's amazing to be back here sitting across the table and not do this remotely. And and also thank you for inviting me as the inaugural podcast speaker, I guess. And it's a great honor. And first of all, congratulations to such a great practice that you have built. This is phenomenal, and particularly focused on urban design in India is quite wonderful. And I had a chance to visit one of your projects as well. So really proud, at the same time excited for what you are going to do for the next several decades here, and sort of not just by the way of projects, but really inspiring the discipline itself and how it might emerge in this context. So, and hopefully more collaborations amongst us as well. So you kind of sort of gave a pretty good background of where I came from, and we can't take who we are out of us, where we come from, and that's foundational to our thinking about everything in life. And I have a few more years over you all, and I realize this more and more as I get older. I have two children, and where you come from becomes a lot more important to who you are. And in between years, when you're a little bit younger, it's a time to explore and sort of defy the knowledge or what you were taught early on, to explore what else is out there, and then, which is fine, right?
Yeah.
You want, we're all, when we're young, we think everything we were brought up with is stupid, and what our parents told was wrong, and we're all going places, and that's okay. I used to say that you have to break the rules, before you sort of accept them, but at the same time, you need to know what rules you're breaking, right?
Yeah.
And that is a bit of a challenge that we learn a little bit with age. If you can do it early on, that's great. When I teach, especially, there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm when you're young to not accept the norms and break it. But if you don't understand what you're breaking something that you don't know. So break the rules, but really understand what rules you're breaking and how they came about. That's very critical. So from that sense, everything that I've learned growing up in this country with very limited resources from where I came from, this is true to all of India for the most part. But of course, as you get more and more affluent, these may not be true. But there was very little that went out of the house. Everything that came into the house by the way of produce, vegetables, anything had to be completely cycled, recycled, reused, including water and drainage, right? We didn't have any systems. So that really taught a relationship to how, this so-called circular way of living when I was growing up from since I was young. And also one thing that I think has been lost both in design as well as general living of for much of the world is this relationship to the nature. Nature, not as in going to a park and enjoying an open space that is very much available in the Western world abundantly, but it's a connection to the rhythms of the nature. When it's hot, when it's cold, not through an app or the weather app telling you what it is, but having that connection. We kind of lost the connection. But what's different now, though, is with climate change, there is nothing that is constant anymore. What you thought of as weather patterns, you have series of seasons, and it is supposed to be cooler these months, it is supposed to be warmer these months. All of those patterns are going out of the door. There's no consistency of the weather anymore, if there is one big thing that we can learn in terms of our relationship. So that's one of the things that I always take with me from my childhood, is that when things are changing, you understand the change without an intermediary telling me, right? So the intermediary could be the weather channel or the building envelope, which continues to isolate us from the outside world, of the systems that we use in the building, or the ways we move the automobile. All of them kind of have disconnected us from the day-to-day workings of the nature, right? So that was a great lesson that I continued to use throughout my career from my childhood. And you mentioned I had a great opportunity, privilege to work at Doshi's office for a very short period of time, and that's all you need, working with the legend to learn about life and work. And then one thing that was very clear was, design and architecture are not the foreground, but they're a backdrop to, or a stage to the life that happens in the built environment. How do you set that up was a profound lesson, the choreography of day-to-day life, everyday life, and not just a sort of episodic life that we enjoy is a great lesson that I took away and I continue to implement that throughout my practice.
It's pretty awesome in terms of what you just said, right? The whole scarcity of resources and how do you kind of look at using everything again and again and the whole circularity of it. And when you actually look at what we're going through and how we can adapt at each point in time when you're looking at urban design, that's one of the key things, right? Adaptability of wherever you're working in urban design, how do you kind of look at big scale, large scale, small scale projects in urban design. One thing I actually wanted to ask you was when you look at these larger projects, they have a longer time duration to kind of come and execute, right? And you've certainly worked on several of them throughout your last 25 years of practice as an urban designer. And they're time tested, and you really need to be like out there every time, day in and out, to ensure that whatever you're working on urban design master plan and actually seeing it implemented, it doesn't lose a sense of what it is. So, but at the same time, there are a lot of external forces that really act on it and see how they kind of change the plans or change the designs or change how you actually look at these long, like time lengthy projects and larger scale master plans. So how do you see that? How do you adapt to it when things change over a period of time and you still have to kind of be at it? Because a lot of these questions actually are, when we work in an urban design setup over here in India, we are developing pretty rapidly, and all our cities are like really facing these challenges all the time, and we have to really be on our toes to kind of take in as many kind of curveballs that come in. But looking at it from a long term, we've just started out like 10 years now, but you have seen it like for much longer, again, working in US, working here, working in UAE, in other international places as well. How do you see that adapting to these external forces and how things change over time?
Yeah, it is. Urban design and urban scale work is quite complex, and the question you asked brings about a variety of dimensions. I've had the privilege of working with both private sector and the public sector, and the dimension through which you're looking at obviously changes in that sort of perspective. But just stepping back out, cities are complex, as you know. They're multi-layered, and there is a mathematical phrase called organized complexity, right? Which is it identifies, it's a thesis by which it identifies a series of variables that are at play. Each of them have an interconnection to the other, and you cannot solve a problem without finding that interconnectivity. There is an approach to practice where either that complexity is oversimplified, sometimes if you look at it purely from a design as just an outcome in itself, that's you oversimplify that complexity. Or other times you get overwhelmed by the complexity and you don't know what to do because you have a whole host of variables. The key is with each project, first of all, there is no single recipe or an outcome for every project across the world. I can't profess to say anything about India because I wouldn't be qualified to speak about it, right? So, but the methodology though is to take the complexity and find the few strings that you can pull that are key to really holding on for a long-term evolution of a project, right? So that's, each project is very, very different. It comes with, some level of messiness, and you have to try it out through iteration to see which combination makes sense, can stand the test of time. In Cambridge, a project that you're familiar with, we took a leap of faith to create an incredibly robust public open space that is owned by the whole project was owned by a private entity in this case, and we quadrupled the open space than the zoning required. Not just that, but we actually oriented to expand beyond the boundaries of the site with the belief that at some point in the future, there's some lines in the sand here that can create a regional infrastructural connection here. It's very much like the little bike lane that you built on the Green Line, Green Mile, sorry. It was very much that. There was nothing on either side that existed, but there were ideas that it could happen. And it took 20 years, but today, because of that link that we made, one could bike and stroll or be in a wheelchair or walk for about 15-20 miles from the western suburbs all the way into downtown Boston because of this literally half a mile long link that we oriented our public realm around. So that was the kind of play in time, that string that I'm talking about, one of the strings that we pulled very early on that worked quite well, and then also the generosity of the space that we created did a lot of wonders. How can you tell a private entity that you need to provide 4 times as much open space? It really created value for all the development, but we managed all the stormwater on the site, and then this is the concept of the string, not alone, but you can actually thread these into a fabric, right? So how do you find the right set of strings that overlay that there is the mutual value, and was another profound thing that we did, and the buildings didn't really matter. We actually didn't see the types of buildings that actually happened 20 years later. We have a sort of a life science laboratory boom in Cambridge. When we did the first master plan, there was not even a typology that we knew as a lab building.
Yeah.
It didn't matter, right? So the city and its layers can evolve. So I was told that we should be speaking close to the mic, so hopefully everybody could hear. So anyway, so that's that gives you a sense of the threads and the needles, and then how you can find the overlays to make the right sort of moves up front, and then the rest should take care of itself.
Really cool. I think early this year, I had the privilege of visiting you at the CBT office in Boston, and I took a walk from the office to what used to be North Point, is now called Cambridge Crossing. I think it's gone through like 5 different iterations of name change itself, and unbelievable amount of change in terms of what was envisaged at that point of time. I remember working on the rendering of North Point back in 2007. And I don't think there used to be like this nice retail block that you have right now at the end of this park. And I see a lot of things that have evolved, but it still feels the same plan that we worked on back in the day. How do you then see this change happening in master plans over decades, if not more? And how do you hold this all together as your role as urban designer?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, the threads that you need to pick, and one thread we did not pick and predetermine is the retail layer, because that is a layer that's quite temporal in nature, right? And it evolves quite rapidly with changing times. If I were to think about what retail was in 2002 and now, it's very, very different, right? But we did ensure the place for ground floors to be active, but also there is this other layer that we always profess. This is I don't know if it's a thread or it's an overarching umbrella, is this concept of authenticity, right? Each place needs to have its own identity and authenticity. It can be copied and borrowed. As I said, the methodologies can be applied and evolved, but you cannot, bring Cambridge to Mumbai or vice versa. So so when the retail layer finally came into play, which was really 15 years later in a robust way, the concept of retail was more experiential, and it was good for us, right? Otherwise, we would have created a fake main street, which I'm glad we didn't. And then, we thought about the nature of the space, the authenticity of the place. Cambridge Crossing is all about open space, and we have to collide the retail with open space. We can't create this another independent layer. So we actually changed the plan a little bit, and we created this shed in the park concept, which actually harkened back to the transportation history of the site as well. But this notion that you could be having a meal or a drink in the restaurant while your kid could be playing in a park, which normally doesn't happen because they tend to be independent layers. So that allowed us not so much depend on exactly what type of retailer and how they all go together, but allowing us to play a lot of games. The other very interesting thing, thinking about the longevity and the long-term nature of the project. Again, take this as methodological, not literal, right? And it applies very much to every part of the world, and that we do work in other parts of the world, and we profess this. When we first started in Cambridge Crossing, we got approved for 5,500 parking spaces for a 5 million square feet open space. 5 million square feet of development, right? That is 500,000 square meters. And we didn't know where all of that parking was going to go. It's one of those threads we didn't pull. We said, we'll figure it out. Let's not serve something that doesn't serve as well, right? It's not just a idealistic urban design approach. It's just cost sink. Each car is going to cost you a lot of money to park. So the game was very well played, and fast forward 15 years. I know we have a nice transit system, but Cambridge Crossing was on the fringe of the city. It was even if you look at Boston, Cambridge back then, people were still driving at that time, right? So, but fast forward 15 years, nobody asked, but our client went back and told the city, we only need 3,000 spaces, and they actually underzoned their own requirement. But if I would have told people that you don't need this much parking that day and pick that battle, I would have gone in the wrong direction. So it's being smart about which layers to pull and all of that. But I think the last thing though with all of this, which is something you're all doing very well, is the stewardship. And we were fortunate to have worked on projects irrespective of the clients for long periods of time. We are passionate about the project, not about the immediate client. We love our clients, don't get me wrong. We serve them, whether it's public or private, but our eyes on the ball in the long term, and being the stewards of the project. And when you do that, whether or not you're on the project, when something changes, that is going to give a lot of agency. But also, the clients become stewards of the project as well, whether they're public or private. So that's going to make sure that things get advanced. Yesterday, while we were walking, you've shown us a woman who was sitting there who became almost the mayor of the project, right? Yeah. So you need people like that to advance your vision. We're not going to be there forever, right? Yeah. So how do you, again, that's another thread. Thread is not spatial. Thread the humans who can influence the life of the project, which is very important.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I just want to know that, when you come back to India now, you spoke about identity, you spoke about process, you spoke about how there are parallels and it works globally. I just want to get a little bit inside your head, and now that you come back to Indian cities, what is the conversation that's going on inside? Are you thinking of like projects that you could do or parallels that you can draw from like you said, Boston was driving 20 years ago, Mumbai is driving today, and we're just getting our transit system in place, the network in place. So I just want to know, when you come back, what are the kind of conversations you have with yourself, maybe, and also what kind of projects and learnings would you recommend us to or anybody who's listening to this
Or even
take back from that, and because we're so used to looking at just ourselves and learning from each other. That's what this podcast is about. So just getting a little in the Indian context. Just want to know some thoughts.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that, like I said, I'm not qualified to answer. Anybody coming from the outside, I now consider myself as an outsider, having lived more than half of my life elsewhere, and that's why we have people like yourself who are doing amazing work, and you're doing it very well. But that having said, and a few things I can sort of think about every time I come here, I do think about is both the tree and the forest, if you will, and in this in this case, it's very, very difficult to focus on the trees.
Yeah.
We always in the West we say focus on the forest, not on the trees, because there are not very many trees,
Yeah.
and in here, and at least the trees are taken care of over there. By what I mean is the humans in this
Yeah.
in this context, right? So, given the scale of humanity that we have in our country as well as our cities, it's often easy to overlook the human scale, and it happens globally. And so fundamentally, how do you bring that human dimension in everything that we're doing is very, very complex, because when we again, like we talked about the organized complexity, if you get lost in the complexity, you're going to miss that very fundamental scale. We're not born with wheels, right?
Yeah.
We're born with 2 feet, and if those in our body doesn't come to our help in our cities, we're not going to be healthy. We're not going to be smart. We can't think. We can't do what we can do. All of these things, are going to be threatened. So I would say, and we have the greatest fortune of being able to focus on that where I come from, just because of the resourcefulness of the place and the systems that are in there. So if there is a way to do that, and then sort of figure out this sort of organized complexity, I'll go back to visiting the site at the Green Mile last night. One thing that struck me was along the lines of this the human scale. I also call it the urban inch, which is a kind of a nice phrase, because when you think urban, it is a scale that is quite complex.
Yeah,
but if you
scale,
marry
yeah.
that with an inch or centimeter, then you realize the responsibility that we have
Yeah.
as designers, and where we play. And at the end of the day, what makes urban design distinct is the spatial layer, right? You ultimately,
Absolutely.
you just can't talk your way through. You have to establish a space that works. So what was smart was you establish this library where children, the teenagers were hanging out and reading, which in itself is a great idea. But what I thought was clever was you use the infrastructural barrier. You told me that there's a point where the highway was coming down a little bit in grade. You couldn't get through the wall, so you had these 2 sides of the space, so which is a nice separation. So you use the infrastructural barrier to create a program that you wanted to have, and it give it space distinctly from the other one. So this is where when I mean by urban inch, there is a philosophical understanding of the city and its need to educate and engage people in different ways through public space. There is the idea of battling with the infrastructure, but then turning it into an opportunity to create the types of spaces that people use. So I think that that sort of summarizes what you can bring from what we are able to do in the West through many of our many of our projects here, in which I think again you're doing quite successfully here.
Oh, thank you. I think that answers made you ask a lot of questions. I think I have just one more. In today the world is globalizing, and we have different diversities living in different parts of the world. How do you think design can change to be more inclusive of different people moving everywhere, because Boston has been doing things in a certain way, Australia does things in a certain way, but now today when you have mixed communities coming there, how do you think we can or make it more inclusive globally as well?
Yeah, this is a major discussion that is happening, particularly in the Western environment, which is actually a really exciting time to be practicing by wrestling with these, particularly post-pandemic. We had two pandemics. One is of this inequality that surfaced quite significantly, and while we were having the actual pandemic itself, and we had a lot of us were happy to have gone homes and flipped open our laptops and continue to have our lives, and a lot of us actually found things that we were able to spend time with family and a whole host of other things, but that wasn't the case for a whole host of people who still had to get on the bus to go be the janitors and run trains and a whole host of things, right? They didn't have that advantage, and there were many other things that were happening. They didn't have access to a lot of things. Nature, for example, has become foundational to cities during pandemic, and that just really, as in our part of the world, that gave a great relief, but that wasn't distributed evenly across the city. So we're having significant conversations about who the city is for, and how do we think about responding and creating better, equitable cities. And there is, like I always say, there's no playbook. We're writing one right now, and I would be foolish to say that we have a solution. But all of this goes to another thing that could be applied globally is how do you engage with communities beyond the immediate boundary of the site. If you're picking one site and if you're doing something there, it has implications beyond within the city. So how do we engage those constituencies that you or we may not think are the constituencies for the site, and bring about the change in the nature of way we create our spaces.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, I think it's it is particularly challenging in every context. I think there are just the complexity keeps on changing. While working in US, you have different challenges. While working in India, we have our own different challenges. And I think as urban designers and change makers, you have to just adapt and come up with this and add a little chapter to that playbook, right? And our own little chapter to this one big playbook of how do we make
of
change,
our learnings and
of
failures.
Our learnings and failures, exactly. And I'm so happy that you are here today with us to share this. I know that it's been the audio podcast was supposed to be for 30 minutes, but I know that the conversation, we are like in the middle of it, and I know that a lot of people have logged in and are listening to this. If you would like to, we would like to continue with a couple of more sort of questions, and if anyone wants to log off, this is the right time. I would like to sort of encourage anyone. I know you've taken your time out of your busy schedule. It's a Monday morning. But thank you for logging in so much, and we're going to continue this journey. We're going to learn from a lot of different people. We're going to share this with all of us, because this is really what has helped us shape our understanding of what the city is, and hopefully it will inspire a lot of other young guys who are listening in to be that change maker that Kishore has been for Cambridge Crossing and several other projects. So at this point, I think I'd like to thank everyone. If you want to hang around, it'd be great if you can stay back. I think we have a couple of more questions that we can delve into, and then we'll call it a day. So thank you, everyone. I would like to ask to this same complexity. Now that we're talking about, I know that I've worked on several projects with you, and I've seen you shepherd a large team on large projects or even small projects actually. I've seen you handle a boardroom with 10 different teams. Some were transport planners, some were from the finance background, some were from the landscape background, and there were just so many different people and different disciplines, and that's where I thought I learned the most in that room. How you held this conversation, how you then sort of channelized it to become, a lot of times these boardrooms can become very challenging. There will be several different ideas that would be on the table, and they would pull you in different directions. What is the role of urban designer at that point of time as the shepherd, like you said, of that project? How do you then channelize all of that to come to a meaningful sort of, learning from all these different ideas that are there? I'd really like to hear, how do you do it?
Okay, you're not going to let me go easily. I thought it was just half an hour.
Trade secrets.
Yeah.
It was like half an hour done.
No, it's great, and there is always a biographical approach to each project, right? We're all, at the end of the day, we're designers, and which is not a bad thing. As much as I mentioned, this is a altruistic endeavor to help the city and the environment as a whole. You have a point of view, and which is a good thing, right? This is what design profession teaches you, to develop a sort of a framework of what each project is about. And I normally go in with my own hypothesis, but at the same time, it's letting the hypothesis evolve. It's like a Polaroid film back in the day. Now, of course, digital cameras. The moment you click, you see exactly the same thing. I don't think many people found this interesting, but given the technology, Polaroid couldn't do that. At first, it was blurry, and it sort of slowly evolves over a period of a minute or so into a full picture. But in the blurry picture, does have every color and every layer. It's not like RGB in different colors. The traditional process of layering and bringing together, right? So you do see the picture evolve slowly. So if you have the mindset from blurry to clear, that is where the colors get refined with the influence of the others. So again, I think just having a strong perspective about the project from before going into the project is important for me. As you all evolve as practitioners, as well as just individuals, just within profession and otherwise, there's a lot that pulls you than your basic skill set, things that you actually enjoy doing, right?
Yeah.
But with each project, I think it's important to find an hour or two of that, clarity before you go into it. Is I would say critical. Stepping back and sort of formulating your point of view about the project. So that helps, and just again at the same time surrounding yourself with smart people, and that's where I really both enjoyed working with you and missed when you all decided to abandon us and move here. But we're glad we continued our journey together in some ways, but hopefully more. But even on the professional side, having others who are smart thinkers, and one of the advantages, which maybe is interesting to you, is we're a small practice, just like you are, at different scales, of course. But there's always a big brother, right? There are much bigger practices than us, and we still are considered a boutique. And when we work, globally, particularly in places like in the Middle East, when we did all of our climate work, we are able to pick the smartest collaborators who haven't been part of our team, right?
Yeah.
So they're going and doing things elsewhere without us, and they're bringing that expertise. So that's important because just like this conversation, right? But if you are a complete practice with everybody within your own practice, inside the practice, your efficiencies drive you to a very different place of what you're producing. So that boardroom or a large room that you're describing, having the right set of actors that can challenge you in right ways is always great fun. And same thing with the clients. But the key is, how do you, as you said, shepherding the process is the key. And also I call sometimes leading the witness. You have, as a designer, you have to lead people to a place.
Yeah.
And that's also very important.
Awesome.
I think it's a very important part you talked about right now. The collaboration in its truest sense. It's not about when everybody say we are a collaborative practice. It's we get into a room and talk about the project and try to figure out what to do. But it's more than that, of really kind of allowing everybody on the team to be the designer, allowing even a transport guy to do something which will change the whole complexity of the project, a water guy coming in and doing something same, and giving that respect is extremely important in collaborations, respecting other people's opinion, at the same time knowing what strings to pull. That's what you talked about in the beginning as well, and ensuring that the plan kind of is in the right direction of whatever the urban design master plan or project that you're working on, which is a big challenge when we do a lot of collaborations in India as well, and also partly because urban design itself as a practice is quite evolving, and you know better than us, in the US has its own kind of curveballs that it went through, and in the 60s it was quite different, and when the whole movement from Jane Jacobs and everything happened, and what we are going to right now as a country is exactly that a lot of our ideas and points that we are talking about is all people-centric, and we as an urban design practice, exactly at an age and time that we are in India, that a lot of places are being developed. Infrastructure is like left, right, center. You see all our streets, all our cities are going through massive infrastructure upgrades. But at the end of the day, it's about the people, right? And urban design plays a very important key role in how do you kind of shape those spaces from that perspective. And what we feel is a big challenge right now in India is how to exactly go from those different scales and talk with people, collaborate with people, and looking at the different kind of experts who come in and contribute to the project in that sense. Looking at projects not like projects, like cities that you're building or places that you're making, going beyond the line that you talked about in the Cambridge crossing. Like, it's not that the master plan would then require that open space and that little connectivity that you talked about, kind of reached out to the larger neighborhoods and make people come into that space, and newer space that you were making. So all of these conversations are extremely crucial when you're doing these in India as well, obviously. The big challenge that we are facing is this rapid scale of urbanization, and how do you find those moments to keep going, doing what you're doing. Our challenges are quite different in that sense, right? We are still struggling to have a simple, walkable, contiguous footpath to say that a person can. So urban design at that scale, that urban inch you talked about, right, is so difficult, and we have to kind of fight our battles at every point in time to make sure at least that thing happens, that we get at least a good kind of space to walk on in our cities. And as everywhere, like cars have kind of overtook the whole discourse, and vehicles are everywhere. And US went through the whole same process, and we are exactly at that same stage, maybe in 60s, what US was doing. We have a huge car lobby who's like making sure a lot of car vehicular infrastructure, whether it's EV, whether it's whatever it is, it's still there. But at the same time, when you're looking at places to create, how do you make sure that people get their due? And the most vulnerable in that sense, the name pedestrian itself is pedestrian, but it's important, right? Like how do you make sure that you give respect to the collaborators, you give respect to whoever you're working with, the people whom you're working with, the stakeholders you're working with, and ensuring that it's not a design by a project or an architect doing a building or a space being just in by an urban designer. Like places don't happen with just one discipline, right? You have to have those multiple collaborators. That's what we constantly strive. And when we work on a lot of projects, where we always remember the kind of work that we did back in the day on a lot of projects of how do you collaborate with people, and the questions always change. I remember this one thing which I would like to maybe say that as well, like from your perspective, what are the kind of questions do you frame in a lot of the projects that you work on are always important, right? And that's the main kind of idea that a lot of these discussions kind of go ahead with. What is the thing that you are trying to solve? So we want to just like maybe culminate the whole thought process that we're talking about. It's not really an interview, it's more of a discussion. So just from that perspective, how do you kind of look ahead when you look at Indian cities again and look at what you've done in the US?
How do you keep inspired? How do you learn through the process?
Yeah. Well, I would be remiss not to mention this. Going back to the previous point, and this point is, in addition to the collaborators, your team internally itself. I was fortunate. I am fortunate to have an extraordinary group of talented team members who actually drive most of what we do. And just like, I had a chance to work with your team as well. So we have a phenomenal team that inspires me every day.
Awesome.
And that's what keeps me going. My team that sort of challenges me and brings something new to the table each time. And these kinds of conversations are very inspiring. Those perspectives. Well, I think you're absolutely correct in really reframing the problem each time. We're seeing a lot of projects where we went in and we actually reframed, and it was very different from the original scope of what the project was, and we were able to create a different scope and different outcome. Not too dissimilar to the kinds of things that you are doing around here. So it's globally I found everybody that we work with, they're very smart, talented people. Their heart is in the right place, but a lot of times, like I said, the efficiencies of production and getting to an end goal come in the way, not become, but so how do you slide into that middle and inspire them that sort of think differently, because we don't have all the expertise and knowledge. So fortunately or unfortunately, majority of our investments are coming by the way of automobile infrastructure, right? There is the fortunate part is there is investment in cities. The unfortunate part is it's in the automobile.
Yeah.
And so how do you shake that thing to do something differently, to get something different as an outcome? And you remember we all worked on Hudairiyat master plan, and in Abu Dhabi, it's a 3,000 hectare large master plan. When we started, there was a major highway running through this middle of this narrow island that was connecting two water bodies, right? You could literally walk 10 minutes from one end to the other. Our scope was not to touch that, and we had a great transport planner who I remember in one meeting who said, the person's sitting behind the wheel is not a car, it's a person. Given a choice, you wouldn't be there. I mean, driving around in Mumbai, in most cities, people, it's a painful experience to be in an automobile to get from place to place. And we keep somehow building our world around it. And we took upon ourselves to rethink that, we went to an analysis where we said there may be a different way to do this, and we were able to lose the highway and build a different project. Same thing when we did the climate work in Abu Dhabi. The whole notion that shade is very important, and there's no shortage of shade structures, but none of them were doing any good because they're above your head and they're designed to work in the middle of the day in the summer when you don't expect or you don't want people to be out in the public space. But because of that, we abandoned the times when people are out there during the mornings and evenings and shoulder seasons. So by rethinking and redeploying in a very different way, but also thinking in a more layered fashion, thinking about water, landscape, wind, solar angles, we were able to create and redefine the methodology. So taking the same kit of parts and rethinking and reestablishing a new method in place, right? That can then become the new methodology. It's again always outside your agency or scope, but you have to take that and you also have to run a practice. Of course, you have to feed the family and all of that, and but you're also trying to ensure that the world is a better place. And I one last parting thing I would say is that we used to think we're about people and your people-oriented design, but we've come to a different resolution that this is both about people and nature in cities, and we have to think about both scales in blending them together in our work, because nature is a tremendous threat. Where our cities have been built not so much in symbiosis with nature, and with climate change, we definitely need to really rethink our cities about that symbiosis between humans and nature. Otherwise, we're not going to survive as a species. So that balance for us is going to be very critical. And again, you're doing this in all of your projects as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I don't think I have any more questions. I'm inspired, and I think you're so absolutely right. We have to do everything and make sure that what our little journey as a practice has left a positive mark, or as a person at the end. So I think thank you so much, and for inspiring us always. I remember the first time I met Kishore was in a mall where Sarfraz and Mahesh introduced us, and that she's the third partner. And Kishore was like, "You guys are planning an urban design practice in India." So I think it's been a wonderful journey. So thank you so much, and I hope to work with you more.
Likewise.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone, for being patient, and join us for our next podcast.